I'm Serenity and this is my channel. Today we're joined by Scarlett and Ginger. Welcome back to another Hometown Horrors. Today we are going to be talking about a case that is eerily similar to the Alexis Trevizo case that just was reposted a couple weeks ago. And that is the case of Alexis Avila. Yes, their names, very similar. We're gonna get into it. And this teenager threw her baby in a trash bin, more like a dumpster, behind a shopping mall. So we're gonna get into it. Before we go any further, I do want to say there are timestamps down below. Feel free to skip around. Before we begin, I do want to give trigger warnings for child abuse and attempted murder with graphic descriptions of it. We are talking about a newborn who sadly was thrown in a dumpster. I don't know how more details I can give to that. If any of these topics you believe you'd be unable to handle, please stop watching, put yourself first, and I'll see you at a later date with a different video. If I get any information wrong, please kindly let me know down below. I tried my best to get the following information as accurately as possible. However, I use multiple different sources, and sources sometimes say different things. Sources, as always, are linked down in the description. Lastly, this video is an informational research study that I am sharing for academic entertainment reasons only. I mean no harm to anyone mentioned, especially the victim and the victim's family. So grab a blanket, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's begin. THOWS, New Mexico is a small town with just about less than 40,000 residents. It's located just outside the Texas-New Mexico panhandle border, so that's pretty far from me, but that is where THOWS, New Mexico is located. The closest Texas city to it would be Lubbock, and the closest bigger New Mexico city would be Roswell. On Friday, January 7th, 2022, at around 7:40 p.m., three friends were seen on surveillance footage pulling up to a couple of dumpsters looking to dumpster dive. This is a pretty normal occurrence for people to do. You know, they say one man's trash is another man's treasure, and they were just looking for things in the dumpster. So two men were looking in one dumpster and a woman was looking in another when the men began hearing a cat-like cry coming from the bin they were looking in. They began digging through the dumpster in fear that it was a kitten that was stuck in there somehow, and they wanted to get it out. But what they would find would be much, much worse. More specifically, what they found was a newborn baby wrapped in trash bag, then wrapped in a filthy towel. The cry that they were hearing was from the baby who was in this bin liner and in the dumpster. They didn't know how long the baby was there. They knew nothing. But the woman immediately started cuddling the baby and trying to warm it up. It was cold outside. It's January in New Mexico. New Mexico still is a desert, no matter what people say about the weather. And the baby seems to be wrapped in some sort of pink blanket or towel. On CCTV footage, you can see that the woman carries the baby off to comfort it and presses kisses to the infant's forehead. In the background, one of the men is calling 911 at around 7:45 p.m. The man informs the operator that they had found a baby in a dumpster, still breathing, with a visible umbilical cord attached, meaning that this baby was a newborn, probably a couple hours old. He then states that the child is actually a little boy who was whimpering when they found him, but not crying. Police immediately arrived on scene. They didn't know what they would show up to, and they took the infant to the hospital to get medical care that the baby needed. Authorities then took statements from the three Good Samaritans who had located the infant and began investigating the scene to see if there were any cameras around that would give them clues to how the baby ended up in the dumpster. These dumpsters were located behind a strip mall, and a man named Joe Imbrail, who owned a store called Rig Outfitters and Home Store, noticed that his shop's cameras that were located in the alley actually pointed at the dumpsters. So he willingly handed over his CCTV footage to the police to aid in the investigation. Police then reviewed the footage where they found a white car pull up to the dumpsters in broad daylight and forcibly throw a small bag of trash that looked like a bag the baby was found in. An officer reviewing the footage noticed that the infant had been dumped about 5.5 hours prior to being found at around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Joe Imbrail, the shop owner, said the following about the CCTV footage. Obviously, he was watching it with the police because it was his. They were probably reviewing it in his shop. And I quote, this is what he said: "What was even harder that nobody has seen is 5 hours of footage of people dumping trash on this baby." This is true. Police were trying to see who was dumping trash in this dumpster besides employees of the businesses located in the area. And they had to narrow down who did it. So for 5 hours, there was footage of people unknowingly throwing trash on top of the newborn baby. Police then ran the license plate of this car that pulled up to the dumpsters and found who it was registered to. They discovered it was registered to an 18-year-old woman named Alexis Avila. They tracked her down and brought her down to the station for an interview that very same day on January 7th, 2022. Now, the interview lasted only about 27 minutes by a detective, and it's recorded, but I don't think I can play the footage for you here. I will link it to a channel that has the full interrogation. I'm pretty sure they bought out the rights to it, and they analyze it. So if you want to watch it, it's linked down below. Now, I am going to verbally talk you through this footage because I think it is so important to understand this case. As soon as the detective entered the room, Alexis asked if she could have some sort of toilet paper for her nose, which was stuffy. He didn't even get the chance to say hello yet or introduce himself before she immediately requested something. The detective's name was Daniel Perez. He asked Alexis if she needed any immediate medical attention, which she then denied. And then he reads her out her Miranda rights, which she signs off on agreeing to talk. The detective then asked if she would like to explain what happened that day, and Alexis agrees to tell him what went on that day as long as he asks questions first. She basically is implying that she's not going to outright give information, that he needs to guide her through what he wants to know. And it's a way that she will not reveal too much information and can keep her story straight. The people who analyze this video explain it as kind of that when you're told just to describe your day, you're giving more information than you're willing to consciously give. But when you're asked questions, you have some sort of guide to stay in, to stick to your story. Detective Daniel then tells Alexis that he got confirmation that she was pregnant. And Alexis replies back that she found out yesterday, which would mean January 6, 2022. This is when her behavior and demeanor begins. Alexis was 18 at this time, and she's talking in a soft-spoken, whispering voice, kind of like this. As we go on, you'll understand what I mean by saying this. She's acting like she's not very intelligent or is lacking some sort of cognitive dissonance in her brain, some sort of processing in her brain. Or I think the easiest way to explain this is she's trying to make herself seem more naive than she is and younger than her age. She's also speaking as if she has some sort of lisp, which is not a bad thing, but again, it's aiding in her trying to age herself down. I'm just mentioning it because later on in the trial, this voice, lisp, quiet demeanor, lack of smarts and naivety is gone. This is just present during her interrogation. When the detective asks how Alexis discovered she was pregnant, she acts confused, asks the detective to elaborate. She then goes on to state that starting in September of 2021, she began to experience back pain stemming from a car accident she was in 2 years prior. She didn't chalk up this pain to anything but phantom pains from the accident. But as the pain continued on, she then asked her mom to take her to the emergency room. At the ER, remember this is in September of 2021, they told her that she had a sprain in her back and prescribed her medicine, but it wasn't aiding in the pain at this visit. They then ran a pregnancy test that came back negative. Her back pain persisted, so she went back to the clinic and they ran a urine sample with results showing up that Alexis was pregnant, which Alexis claims is how she found out the day before on January 6th. When asked who took her to the clinic, she's adamant that she took herself because her parents were at work. The detective then reveals he spoke to a friend of hers who claims Alexis knew she was pregnant in March of 2021, which means she knew as soon as the child was conceived. 9 months before January is March. However, she denies this after repeating this friend's name multiple times, confused. Now, this is the first time in the interview that Alexis hyperfixates on a small, pretty much meaningless detail. Instead of denying that she was pregnant earlier, like she claimed, she is just fixating on this said friend's name. The pattern will repeat itself multiple times throughout the interview. The detective moves on to asking Alexis to recount her day, and she claims it was the same as it has been the past few days, having been dealing with a bout of constipation. She would spend her day using the restroom, then go back to sleep, and then repeat this pattern trying to fix her constipation. Alexis didn't know what time she had woken up that day in the morning because she was homesick all week from school and didn't have to work at the boot store she was employed at that day. According to the friend that told detectives she knew she was pregnant, Alexis knew she was pregnant. Alexis didn't go to school the week before holiday break in December and hasn't been to school the first week back in January. So if you make an educated guess, no one from school had seen Alexis in the last 4 weeks, the last month of her pregnancy. Alexis then says her dad brought her pills to fix her constipation, but she doesn't know what they were called, and then she went back to sleep after taking them. Daniel then asks what happened after that, but every time he presents this seemingly simple question, Alexis replies back, "What do you mean?" He then tells her they both know what happened, but she rebuttals that she can't tell him because she's not good at explanations. The detective states that he is just trying to figure out how she gave birth and then dumped the baby. Alexis then explains that during one of her wake-ups from her sleeping, she went to the restroom when the baby just came out, but the word she used is it. I stated this in the Alexee Trevizo video, but in both cases, the teenagers use the word it to describe the baby, not the word baby or him or infant, newborn, whatever. The word is always it. It's like they're subconsciously do not want to consider the newborn a human being and rather an inanimate object by using the term it. Alexis claims she thought the baby was feces, but it wasn't, and she whispers the last word like this whole ordeal is some sort of secret. She then was in her house and went into a panic about not knowing what to do. She cleaned herself up, left the baby where it was, and tried to build up the courage to call her mom, but she couldn't because she was scared. Again, she uses the word it, and I will say this, she doesn't mention at all throughout the interrogation, but at some point she would have had to cut the umbilical cord in order to leave the bathroom. Then repeatedly she goes on a tangent that she was scared and in fear her mom would hate her. Detective Daniel asks why Alexis thinks her mom would hate her. This is when her new hyper-focus comes. Alexis claims she just turned 18 a month ago, meaning December, and she was the baby in her family. When asked if there was multiple restrooms in the house and what she did after she had delivered, Alexis claimed there was only one restroom in the house and she began cleaning it because, again, she was scared and had no idea what to do. Alexis then wrapped the baby in a towel. Again, she uses the word it to describe the infant. Keep this in mind. Throughout this whole interrogation, Alexis is using the word it, but I will be using actual pronouns and terms like newborn and baby to describe the boy. Daniel asks if it ever crossed Alexis's mind to call an ambulance or contact the fire department, but again, she claims that she was scared and didn't know what to do. The officer pushes her, asking what exactly she was afraid of, and Alexis responds that the baby had come out of nowhere. Then the officer says, but you knew yesterday, the day before, so the baby is not really some sort of surprise. On the defense, Alexis says she knew but she didn't know anything, or that the infant was coming that day. When asked why she didn't contact anyone, Alexis said, again, she was scared. Now, Daniel then states there is a difference between being scared and being young. Obviously, with pregnancy, there are signs. Your body changes. You stop getting your period, that sort of thing. Again, she responds she didn't know anything and she was getting her period throughout the whole 9 months. The only thing she noticed is she was eating more and gaining weight. It feels almost like the detective knows he's on the verge of a breakthrough. He then restates what Alexis has told him up to that point. She was in the restroom, gave birth, and wrapped him in a towel, but what happened after that? She says she just left, seemingly her house, and drove around and put it where I put it. Daniel is seemingly frustrated by Alexis at this point, and her "what do you mean?" repeated questions to every question he asks. She put the trash bag, which we now know had the baby in it, in the car, stating that her car was messy. Then she backtracks, stating she put it in the bag and then put the baby in the car. When she was in the car, she had 2 trash bags. One she took with her, a black bag and a white bag, to put the baby in. She placed the baby in the second bag and drove around the city not knowing what to do. Prompted again, asking where she was going, Alexis said she drove to JCPenney because she lived in and was driving around that area. Then she just threw the bag in the trash. Now she says trash and not dumpster as a way to downplay her actions. Not that throwing a baby in the trash would be any better, but kind of downplay what she did. Alexis also admits to tying off the top of the bag with a hair tie. That was one of hers. She was by herself the whole time and never told anybody. They go through the minor details again. The color of the trash bag, the type of trash can, and the color of the dumpster before the detective states that she is 18. She knows right and wrong. Again, Alexis says, but she just turned 18. It's not like she's been 18 forever. And she actually starts smiling when she says this. She claims that the hair tie she used to tie off the top of the bag was broken, so you could have reached your hand in there. A newborn baby does not have the strength to be reaching and crawling out of the bag like she's insinuating. Daniel then asked what she thought was going to happen. She didn't call EMS and never notified law enforcement. She claims she didn't know what would have happened. She was in a panic and there was a baby in front of her. Alexis never notified anybody. This is not normal behavior. She again states she was in a panic and had just turned 18. The detective, seemingly frustrated, decides at this point to take a short break, and Alexis asks if her mom can come into the room, but he responds she's 18. As she keeps mentioning, she's 18. So she is a legal adult, no longer a minor. She then states back, can my mom be in the room while you're gone? He comes back and they pick up where they left off. The mom was never in the room. He then asked what time did this dumping happen. Alexis claims around 2:15 p.m. She then drove around trying to figure out what to do and then drove home. Sat on her bed trying to figure out what she was supposed to do. She was still alone and had told nobody about what happened. She sought no medical attention, and when asked if she thought of what could have been happening to the infant, she said she didn't. She then says something odd, and I quote, "My mom said I was in love with it." Then the detective informs her that the baby was okay, and she breathes a sigh of relief. Whether this is from actually being relieved that baby boy was alive and okay, or realizing that she won't be charged with murder, there is no telling. Even when her parents return home from work, Alexis still doesn't tell them what happened. Alexis claims her parents found out about her pregnancy when the officers showed up at her door that night in order to bring her in for questioning. But Daniel states she knew she was pregnant before January 6th, the day before, as she claims. Alexis states that she knew back whenever, but didn't know until yesterday, in a sense like she was in denial about her pregnancy. When asked to elaborate, she claims she knew back in August of 2021, or maybe before that. This was just crumbling her earlier story. But she goes on to state that while they were at a clinic, they didn't tell her how far along she was, which is why she didn't know the baby was coming that day. And she still got her period every month. Back in August of 2021, she took 2 pregnancy tests. One was positive and one was negative, so she took the negative as the factual test. The detective then asks why in back of June of 2021 she ran away from home and was sending unaliving messages to her mom, and if it had anything to do with the baby's father. The detective is trying to ask if the baby's father had anything to do with why Alexis hid the pregnancy and if she was in danger, but she's adamant that none of this has to do with him. Keep that in mind for later. The detective then asks for the baby father's name, which is Steven Astorga. He is 16 or 17, and they've been together for about 18 months after meeting in school. Now, it later came out that Steven was 16, which means though they were both minors when the baby was conceived, the age of consent in New Mexico is 17, so this relationship is technically illegal. The couple broke up in August of 2021, seemingly before Alexis turned 18, which would have been around the time Alexis claimed she found out she was pregnant, right when the new school year started. When asked if Alexis thought that maybe she was better off without a child, she said she knew she was young, but she knew she would be able to graduate from school. That wasn't a worry. She had a stable job. Money is not a worry. And she hesitates by saying, "I would be able to. If the baby is okay, I want it." The detective then states, "What if I told you the baby was dead then?" Alexis claimed nothing. She stays quiet. Wrapping up the interview, Daniel asks if she needs any medical attention, at the very least because she did just give birth. And she asks if her mom can take her to get checked out, or if her mom can come into the room. The constant need to have her mom near contradicts her earlier statement that she didn't tell her mom in fear of her mom hating her. If Alexis was truly fearful of her mother just a couple hours earlier, why is she constantly asking for her mother now? She is then released and is asking for her mom when Daniel informs her that she needs to speak with Mrs. Avila. Alexis asks why she can't be in the room while they talk, and Alexis is then left to sit out of the room while the detective talks to her mom, and the pair leave together, seemingly to get checked out after leaving the police station. So I do want to go back a bit in the story. For when the officers arrive on scene, their body cam video shows their confusion as to how the baby is in the dumpster and if the woman in the trio who found the infant was actually the one responsible. I mean, the story in itself is wild. The officers begin interviewing the 3 people, and about half an hour of questioning, they conclude that the woman with the men was not the one who threw the baby in the trash. After they willingly submitted their DNA samples that all came back negative, their hypothesis is confirmed. The 3 people did have a minor criminal history, but it didn't really matter in this case. In fact, Hobbs community rallied together to raise money for one of the men, Michael Green, who was unhoused, and they got him an RV to live in. While the police were interviewing the trio, the baby was taken to the hospital to get checked out. The local hospital wasn't actually capable of the extensive treatment that the baby needed, so he was air transported to Lubbock, Texas hospital for intensive treatment. Even though the infant was transferred across state lines in this case, it was easier to airlift him to Lubbock than to Roswell or Albuquerque, New Mexico for his care. At this hospital, he received the additional care he needed, including cleaning him up from being cold, bloody, and dirty, along with clipping the umbilical cord properly. He was treated in the NICU unit and given a blood transfusion, attached to a feeding tube, and put on oxygen. The good news is he was in stable condition. When he arrived at the NICU, his body temperature was so low that he probably had hypothermia. Once the baby was released from the NICU, he was transported to the New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department, or the CYFD, to be in their care. Luckily, the police were able to track down the baby's father and interviewed him in order to confirm that he was the father. Stephen Astorga decided to take on custody of his son and named him Saul Astorga. His family claimed they had no idea Alexis was pregnant, and Stephen did say Alexis claimed she was pregnant in around August of 2021, but later said she had a miscarriage, which he's a 16-year-old boy. If your almost ex-girlfriend says she's no longer pregnant, you wouldn't really think more into it. It's probably a relief off his shoulders. Stephen and his family did cooperate with the police, CYFD, and the court's investigation as a term of them being able to keep Sal in his custody as they fought for full custody. On January 9th, 2022, Alexis Avila was arrested and charged with child abuse and attempted murder. Her mom, Martha Avila, said she had no idea her daughter was pregnant. It was a shock to the family, and later on would say she believed Alexis' story and how everyone makes mistakes. New Mexico State petitioned for Alexis to be held in pretrial detention for her crimes. During her arraignment in Lea County District Court on January 12, 2022, the judge allowed Alexis Avila to be held under house arrest until her trial, instead of her being held in jail until her trial. This was due to her arrest warrant being signed by a judge who agreed to a $10,000 unsecured bond appearance. So she was bonded out and allowed to be kept under basically house arrest. Alexis was represented by a district defender named Abukin Adepchupu, I hope I'm saying that right, I'm not, and made the following statement at the arraignment, and I quote, "Alexis is barely 18 herself. What happened is already a tragedy for the family and the community. As humans, we should practice compassion as we wait for the justice system to work." Again, with the barely 18 thing. The baby's father, Stephen, and the whole Astorga family did get a lawyer to navigate this whole process of the judicial system. During the arraignment, their attorneys, Monica Cruz and Josh Birmingham, made the following statement, and I quote, "Stephen Astorga is grateful to all of the people who helped find and care for baby Saul after the heartbreaking events of January 7th. The Astorga family are fully cooperating with the police, the courts, and CYFD. Stephen and his family are over the moon that baby Saul is now part of their family. He is happy, healthy, and a handsome baby." Stephen did not know that Saul's mother was still pregnant, as she reported that she suffered a miscarriage. It wasn't until the news broke of what happened to baby Saul that he and his family learned the truth. They wish they had known that Saul's mother was still pregnant so that they could have helped avoid this horrific situation. They are asking for prayers and understanding as they navigate this difficult process and work to ensure that Saul remains in the safe and loving arms of his father. The 3 citizens who found baby Saul testified how they discovered him in the dumpster, initially thinking that he was a cat. They also spoke of how they kept the baby warm until police arrived. One of the officers named Riddick testified at the arraignment, and I quote, "The baby presented to me appeared to be very cold, appeared to be worn down, and in my opinion, appeared to be very exhausted. The baby was wrapped up in pink, like a bath towel that was dirty with bloodstains on it. The baby had bloodstains, or blood all over him too." Another officer named Jennifer Maxwell was sent to follow the ambulance to the local hospital to keep an eye on baby Saul, and she said this at the arraignment, and I quote, "They put a little IV in his arm, and he didn't even flinch. They did a poke test to check his blood sugar, and he was just lying there. I mean, he almost looked lifeless." Lastly, Detective Daniel Perez spoke about his interrogation with Alexis Avila, which I already walked you through. He did make a statement about her behavior, and I quote, "I was expecting to see someone who was remorseful, truly affected by such an event, but I did not." Judge William Strewridge did rule that Alexis would be held under house arrest, but if she violated her requirements of not being allowed to use social media or skipping on a counseling session, she would be sent straight to jail. It is a small town, so it didn't take local newspapers to find some more information out on Alexis Avila. On January 14th, 2022, an article was released about a 911 call she made on June 12th, 2021, claiming Stephen Astorga, the baby's father, and her still boyfriend at the time, was assaulting her. The operator picked up the call, and Alexis can be heard screaming, "Get the fuck away from me." Then responds to the operator by saying, "Hi, this is Alexis Avila, and I'm calling for assault." She then tells the dispatcher that while at a place called Club La Sierra, Stephen had hit her, and the pair returned to the Avila home, where Martha Avila, Alexis's mother, called 911 herself. Alexis asked for a police officer to be sent to the house, but then Alexis loses her control on the phone. Martha says to the dispatcher, and I quote, "Well, my daughter was at a quince, and apparently her boyfriend hit her, punched her in the face, and her cousin and the boyfriend or friend or whatever got into a fight, and he did punch her, and I want to press charges." In the background of this call, you can hear Stephen being asked what happened at the club with Alexis's friend. Police go out to the scene, and the said friend that Stephen apparently got in a fight with went to the hospital with a broken finger. Statements were taken, but no criminal charges were pressed. So keep this in mind. Alexis would have been about 3 months pregnant at the time of this 911 call, and just 2 months later, she and Stephen would break up. In August, when she told him when she had lost baby Saul in a miscarriage. So in late April of 2023, the trial began. Alexis Avila was now 19 years old, and baby Saul was now 15 months old. The defense's main defense would be that Alexis Avila didn't premeditate her actions of discarding baby Saul in a dumpster, and she did it because she had undiagnosed mental health issues. Alexis's lawyer argued that although her actions were wrong, they stemmed from her undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and during the incident, she had disassociated and detached from her feelings. Through her mandatory counseling, Jack Hancock, a licensed clinical social worker, claimed during her sessions with Alexis, they diagnosed her with persistent mental health issues. Alexis's mom, Martha Avila, also testified for the defense by saying, and I quote, "This is not an action she would have taken if she had been in the right state of mind." The prosecution's case rested on the sole fact that, throughout the whole ordeal, Alexis showed no remorse for her actions. Attorney General, Deputy of the prosecution, Mark Probosco, said, and I quote, "Your Honor, whatever we see here is a pattern of someone who is not only showing remorse, but someone who in fact takes deliberate steps in her own recollection of this event to minimize her own role. It's something that was manifest and clear in the video, which was that she was attempting to kill the most innocent life, the most helpless life of her own child." They rested their case on the final statement that Alexis Avila might have been diagnosed with some sort of mental health issue, but the crime she committed was intentional and violent to the infant. It was time for the jury to deliberate, and soon after, they had found Alexis Avila guilty on both charges of attempted murder and child abuse. On May 1st, 2023, Judge William Scrutich, the same judge from her arraignment, sentenced Alexis Avila to 16 years in prison. At the sentencing, defense attorney Abakju said the following about the sentencing. "Now Alexis will be about 34 years old when she gets out of prison. We're trying to work with the prison to make sure she gets access to therapy and education while incarcerated so that when she gets out, she can have a meaningful life." What about the baby's life wasn't meaningful? I'll keep my thoughts for the end. Stephen Astorga, Alexis's ex-boyfriend and Saul's father, spoke at the court's hearing on the behalf of his child. And I quote, "My son, my healthy, my loving and handsome baby boy, he is never going to forget the things you did. But for that, I can say that my son will be somebody one day, no matter how much he has been through." Domingo Avila, Alexis's father, spoke next about how she had a good upbringing and a loving home, and how one day he hopes to be a part of his grandson's life. His statement was, and I quote, "I also pray very much that one day we get the chance to meet our grandson, baby Saul, Your Honor. I ask that you please have mercy on her soul." Lastly, after hearing her sentence, Alexis Avila took the stand while tears rolled down her face, apologizing to her son and her family for her actions, and I quote, "I regret that his first hours of life were traumatic, and I regret that he will always have this in the back of his head and will think I do not love him because that's what he'll read and hear. But that's not true at all. I do love him. I truly do. I regret that I deprived him of having a loving and caring family. Yes, he has his dad, and he also has his dad's family. But when my family and I love, we love hard, and we love with everything we can. To my family, family is everything to us. My nieces and nephews are everything to myself and my parents." She then goes on to state that she is learning how to deal with stress and anxiety and regrets missing all of her son's first milestone. This is the first time in the case that Alexis Avila showed any type of remorse, and it is after hearing that she was sentenced to 16 years in prison for her crime. Before Alexis is returned behind bars to serve her sentence, Judge Newbridge tells the court that her 16-year sentence will be followed by 2 years of probation, and none of the time she will serve will be more difficult than the life she created for herself to live, and I quote, "You have given yourself a life sentence of knowing what you did with your child, and you have also given your son the same life sentence." He then finishes his statement by saying, "It's by the luck of God and grace that they're not deliberating and sentencing on a murder case if Saul wasn't found by some Sumerians." That very day, May 1st, 2023, the defense appealed Alexis Avila's sentence. On May 5th, 2023, her motion to be released from prison on her pending appeal was filed but was denied later in September of 2023 by Judge Efren Cortez. They appealed this ruling. Then on October 18, 2023, the decision was reversed by Judge Christian Borgordes and Judge Jane Yehulim of the appeals court. These two judges came to the conclusion that since they don't believe Alexis is a flight risk, she can be released under the same pretrial conditions she had before, which was house arrest, no social media, and mandatory counseling. They then state, and I quote, "The appeal raises a substantial question of law likely to result in a reversal or an order for a new trial." On October 2023, her conditions of release were held and is currently waiting for a new date for the New Mexico Supreme Court to decide on her appeal for a new trial. So she is currently released on house arrest in Hobbs, New Mexico. Alexis is not behind bars despite her trial's verdict and sentencing, and I stated this in my Alexee Trevizo's case, but New Mexico is a safe haven state. They have safe haven laws, which means parents can legally drop off a healthy baby who is under 90 days of life at a safe location such as a hospital, police station, or fire department. The parents would not face any sort of charges for doing this if they didn't didn't want to raise the infant. So why did Alexis do this? Instead, she threw her baby in a dumpster. Like, it was trash. And by some grace of God, some higher power, whatever you want to call it, Saul powered through. God forbid he was still alive if no one found him when a garbage truck picked up the rubbish. And he would have been crushed by a trash compactor. Think whatever higher power you want that this baby is okay and is alive and is living seemingly a good life with his father. I said this, I'll keep saying this. If you're old enough to be having sex, you should know your options. You have Google, look up options. And Martha Avila wasn't mad when she found out what Alexis did. Stephen Astorga took full responsibility for Saul, who might deal with health complications from his mom's actions for the rest of his life. None of this had to happen. None of it. Now, before we conclude, I do want to do some final opinions and talk about similarities between this case and the Alexee Trevizo case. I'm sure a lot of you will agree with me. The fact that her statement was that her family loves hard kind of insinuated that Stephen couldn't give their son a good life. That family took in the baby that was theirs. No questions asked. And he's now, by the time I'm recording this, 2 years old? Should have just turned 2? Sure, the baby is perfectly fine and well loved. The similarities between this Alexis Avila case and the Alexee Trevizo case are very similar, okay? They're both teenagers, lived in small towns, did multiple things to infants. But the biggest difference is that Saul made it out alive and Alex didn't in that case. By some grace of God, that hair tie, Alexei didn't tie the bag, whatever, the baby could have suffocated to death. He didn't, and that is amazing. But I fear that this case is going to set a precedent in the Alexee Trevizo case, which goes to trial, I want to say in September of this year. Saul lived. Alexis got out. She is out on house arrest. And from some reports that I read, there is a police officer stationed at that house 24/7. So that is city resources 24/7 on that house. That's a whole nother government money being spent on that because she can't sit in jail waiting for a retrial. If she has a mental illness, I hope she's getting the help she deserves, she needs, but that is not an excuse for throwing your baby in a dumpster like trash, because the baby is not trash. You saw the video, she didn't care is what I'm trying to say. Throughout my time doing these videos, this is the 4th case in I think a year and a half that I've covered in New Mexico that a child was the victim of a horrendous crime. And from my research and as I go into more cases, I've realized how bad of an issue New Mexico has with child abuse. It's so bad, and how lenient they are with the perpetrators of that abuse. They're let off. I'm really fearful that 1, Alexis is going to be let out. No repercussions. Maybe she'll just have probation. 2, that this is going to set a precedent in the Alexee Trevizo case because she, right now, you watched my Trevizo case, is on campus at NMSU, I believe. So I fear that both of these girls are going to be let off scot-free without any repercussions for their actions, and the repercussions for something they did that is extremely, extremely harmful. And lack of a better word, bad. They did something that is unsurmountably disgusting. At the end of the day, I hope that Alexis Avila never gets to see Saul in her life, ever. She doesn't deserve to be near that child. Maybe her parents can. I hope his dad's family keeps it like that. But yeah, that is all the information I have on this case. I know that near the end, my thoughts were kind of all over the place. This case gets me all over the place. I'm sorry about the dogs change. They all wanted to come in and out throughout this whole thing. But yeah, let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Hopefully more concise than mine were. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And my social media are all linked down below if you want to follow me. The doggo picture of the week is this picture of Clover asleep. He sleeps so funny. But yeah, that is it. Love you, mean it, kisses, don't think stupid, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye!